Emily Hartwell, born and raised in a small town in Michigan, had harbored an unchanging passion deep in her heart since childhood. It was a pure love for painting. From the day her grandfather William first placed a brush in her hand when she was 5 years old, her world had been filled with color. "Emily, there's a special light in your eyes. Treasure it," her grandfather William whispered gently, wrapping his grandson's small hands in his aged ones. William had worked as a painter in Chicago in his youth and possessed such talent that several of his works were housed in museums. However, he had turned to business to support his family, and even after achieving success, he continued to hold his love for art in his heart. Emily's mother Margaret couldn't understand her father's passion for art. Her values were clear. She believed that a stable marriage, a respectable home, and ordinary happiness recognized by society should be life's goals. Having grown up in a wealthy family, she couldn't comprehend the unstable path of art. "Emily, keep painting as just a hobby and get a proper job. Stability is what matters most for women," Margaret repeatedly told Emily when she tried to major in art in college. In the end, Emily gave in to her mother's strong opposition and enrolled in business school. Only her grandfather watched her decision with sad eyes, but he said nothing. After graduating from college, Emily got a job at a local accounting firm and married Michael Roberts, a banker she met through her mother's introduction. Michael had a stable income and good prospects, making him an ideal son-in-law in Margaret's eyes. Emily herself tried to convince herself that she was satisfied with her ordinary but peaceful married life. However, during 7 years of marriage, Emily's heart gradually became tormented by emptiness. She no longer held a paintbrush, and the art supplies inherited from her grandfather gathered dust in the back of the closet. While Michael was hardworking, he rarely showed interest in his wife's inner life. 3 years ago, grandfather William quietly passed away. On the day of the funeral, Emily held her grandfather's hand and remembered the promise from her childhood. "Someday you'll become a wonderful painter. I believe that." Those were her grandfather's final words. Shortly after, Emily discovered she was pregnant. While she felt joy at the birth of new life, Michael's attitude was cold. Fearing that having a child would rob him of his freedom, he gradually began staying away from home. 6 months ago, Noah was born. The moment she held her small son in her arms, Emily knew unconditional love for the first time. However, that happiness didn't last long. 2 months after giving birth, Michael's affair was discovered. The other woman was a young woman from his workplace. "I feel suffocated being with you. I can't stand the babies crying either. I need a freer life," Michael said during the divorce proceedings, even reluctant to pay child support. In the end, all Emily received was a small property settlement. Her sister Jessica worked at a luxury department store's brand shop. Beautiful and sociable, she was their mother's pride and was constantly compared to Emily. For Jessica, her sister's divorce was nothing but family shame. "I never imagined my sister would become a single mother. What am I supposed to tell my friends?" With Jessica's cold words at her back, Emily held 6-month-old Noah close. Looking at her small son's sleeping face, she vowed in her heart that for this child, she would overcome any difficulty. On the day she returned to her parents' home, Emily's belongings were surprisingly few. Just baby supplies, minimal clothing, and the art supply set she had pulled from the closet. Margaret watched with a sour expression but couldn't abandon her blood-related daughter and grandson. "This is temporary. Find a job quickly and become independent." Her mother's words were cold, but that was enough for Emily. The moment Emily crossed the threshold of her family home, she felt childhood memories resurface. But now she was a divorced woman with a baby in her arms. Margaret glanced at her grandson Noah only once before instructing her to take her luggage to the small room on the second floor. "That's your old room. But it's temporary. Find a job quickly and leave." The coldness in her mother's words made Emily's heart sink. But she had no choice. Her bank account held only the meager funds remaining after the divorce settlement, and with a newborn, she had nowhere else to go. From the next morning, Emily began searching for work in local newspapers and on the internet. Noah woke up frequently during the night, and his feedings and diaper changes left her sleep fragmented. Still, during the day she desperately searched job listings, created resumes, and made phone calls. "I'm a single mother with a 6-month-old baby," Emily would explain, and each time, the voice on the other end of the phone would suddenly turn cold. Even when she managed to schedule interviews, when she actually appeared with her baby, the hiring manager's expressions would cloud over. "What will you do when your child gets sick? Have you found daycare?" Practical questions came one after another, leaving Emily at a loss for answers. Finding daycare openings was also difficult, and even if she found one, she couldn't afford the fees without securing a job first. After 2 weeks had passed, Margaret's irritation reached its peak. While preparing dinner, she threw sarcastic words at Emily. "With such a small child, who do you think would hire you? Face reality. You don't have any skills." Jessica also sided with her mother. Returning from the department store, she looked down at Emily, who was soothing Noah on the sofa. "My friends ask about you. They ask how my sister is doing. I'm too embarrassed to say you're a single mother. Everyone else is building proper families." Emily endured in silence. She understood that arguing wouldn't change the situation. At night, after Noah fell asleep, she quietly shed tears. She wished her grandfather were there so many times. One afternoon, Emily was spending time quietly at home. Noah was unusually sleeping for a long time, and Margaret and Jessica were out. In the rare silence, she visited her grandfather's room on the second floor. The room, unused for 3 years, preserved her grandfather's memory intact. Art books lined the bookshelf, and old photographs sat on the desk. Emily opened a drawer. There was a familiar wooden box inside. Opening the box revealed a set of high-quality paintbrushes. It was her grandfather's precious collection that Emily had seen as a child. At the bottom of the box was a letter from her grandfather, folded and tucked away. "To my beloved Emily. If you're reading this, I'm no longer in this world. But don't worry. Your talent will never disappear. Begin painting again with these brushes. No matter how difficult times become, art will save your soul. Don't give up. I'm always watching over you. With love, grandfather." Tears overflowed from Emily's eyes. The passion she had long forgotten welled up from deep in her heart. She picked up a brush and felt its texture. It was as if her grandfather's warm hands were wrapping around her own. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Emily took out a small sketchbook. Sitting at the kitchen table, she began drawing her son's sleeping face. At first her hand trembled, but gradually the brush movements became smooth. The time spent painting in the silence of the night became Emily's only comfort. Released from the harsh reality of daytime, she could reclaim her true self for the first time in a long while. She carefully transferred to canvas Noah's sleeping face, the night sky visible through the window, her grandfather's image from memory, and her own hopes. After about a week, a glimmer of hope began to appear in her job search. She found part-time work at a local cafe for mornings only. The hourly wage was low, but she could work while leaving Noah at nearby temporary childcare. However, that hope didn't last long either. One night, when Margaret visited Emily's room, she discovered the painting spread out on the desk. "What are you doing? What is this?" Margaret's voice was stern. Emily hastily put down her brush. "I was just painting a little. At your age, you're still doing such dreamlike things? Face reality. You have a baby. If you have time for this, look for work more seriously." Margaret stared at the painting and frowned. "Your grandfather wasted time on such nonsense too. That's why he eventually had to do ordinary business. Are you going to follow the same path?" Emily was hurt by her mother's words but answered quietly. "These are grandfather's keepsakes. I have no intention of throwing them away." "Keepsakes? Don't say such spoiled things. Stop escaping from reality. You have responsibilities." Margaret left the room in anger. Emily was left alone, staring at her painting. Her grandfather's words echoed in her heart, "Don't give up." The next day, Jessica also sided with their mother. "You're still painting? With a child, I can't believe you have such luxury. Be more realistic. However, Emily's resolve didn't waver. She wouldn't let anyone take away the time she spent painting at night. It was her final bond with her grandfather and the only time she could be herself. Work at the cafe began. From early morning until afternoon, Emily worked desperately. Customer service, operating the register, cleaning, it was physically demanding, but for the first time in a while, she could interact with the outside world. Her colleagues were kind, especially an older female staff member named Betty, who understood Emily's situation. Seeing a young mother like you reminds me of my younger self. I also had a period when I raised children alone. It's tough, but surely a path will open up. Betty's warm words became great support for Emily. However, at home, harsh reality still awaited her. When she returned from the cafe, exhausted, she was greeted by the cold stares of her mother and sister. With just that salary, when will you ever become independent? Margaret's words were merciless. Indeed, with only part-time income, it was difficult to rent an apartment and become independent. Still, Emily didn't give up. She gripped her brush in the middle of the night, continuing to entrust her hopes to colors. She painted Noah's growth, gave form to her dreams, and vowed in her heart that someday she would surely meet her grandfather's expectations. In the silence of the deep night, she felt she heard her grandfather's voice, just a little more, Emily. After the storm, a rainbow always appears. With those words in her heart, she continued moving her brush. The harsh cold of December enveloped the Michigan town. 2 months had passed since returning to her parents' home, and Emily's life had become a battle against chronic fatigue. 8-month-old Noah's night crying had become severe. It was teething time, and his small body was tormented by discomfort. That night too, Noah began crying intensely around 11 p.m. Emily held him, sang to him, gave him milk, and changed his diaper, but her son's crying wouldn't stop. She could hear Margaret's tongue clicking from the next room. There it goes again. Emily held her son to her chest and walked around the room. However, Noah's crying became even louder. Even after 1 a.m. passed, he continued crying. Jessica's shouting voice echoed from downstairs. It's so noisy. I told you I have to get up early tomorrow. Emily was desperate. She closed the window, wrapped her son in a blanket, and tried to minimize the sound as much as possible. However, the baby's crying penetrated the walls and echoed throughout the house. At 2 a.m., Margaret finally burst into the room. Her hair was disheveled and her eyes were bloodshot. Enough already. This has been going on for 3 days. Mom, I'm sorry. It seems like his teeth are coming in. Margaret cut off Emily's explanation with her hand. No more excuses. We work too. Why should we have to accommodate your convenience? Noah's crying became even more intense. As if sensing his mother's anger, his small body trembled. Make him quiet. Margaret's voice shook with anger. 3 days of sleep deprivation had robbed her of reason. Emily herself had reached the limits of exhaustion, but she had to protect her son. I'm sorry, I'll make him quiet right away. However, no matter what effort she made, Noah's crying wouldn't stop. Past 3 a.m., Jessica also came to the room. Sister, enough already. I have an important presentation tomorrow. Sorry, but he just won't stop crying. What do you mean it won't stop? That's your problem. Don't cause trouble for us. Jessica's words were cruel. Emily held her son while receiving her family's cold stares. At 4 a.m., when Margaret appeared again, her anger had reached its peak. I've had enough. It's too noisy. Take that child and get out right now. Emily froze. Her mother's words didn't seem real. Mom, it's snowing outside. On a night like this, where can I go with a baby? I don't care. You chose this path. You chose to divorce and become a single mother. Jessica also sided with their mother. That's right. Giving birth to such a piece of trash baby. Surely grandfather's death and father's death were your fault too. You bring misfortune to the family. Jessica's words deeply wounded Emily's heart. The pain of being told that the deaths of her loved ones were her fault was indescribable. Sister, that's too cruel. Cruel? It's reality. As long as you're here, we'll have no peace. Margaret looked at the clock. It's already 4:30 a.m. I can't stand it anymore. Get out right now. Mom, please. Just give me a little more time. In the morning, I'll look for somewhere else. No. Right now. Don't think you can stay even one more minute. Emily held her son with trembling hands. Noah was still crying, but his voice was gradually becoming weaker. His exhausted small body trembled in his mother's arms. I understand. Emily's voice was quiet, but deep resolve dwelled within it. She stood up and took an old bag from the closet. Her hands were shaking, but she packed the bare minimum necessities. A few diapers, a can of formula, a baby blanket, and her own thin coat. Finally, she carefully wrapped and packed the paintbrush set she had received from her grandfather. Checking her wallet, she found only $87. Payday at the cafe was still a week away. Hurry up. Margaret's voice was merciless. Emily wrapped her son in a thick blanket and shouldered her bag. At the entrance, she turned around. Thank you so much for everything. These weren't sarcastic words, but heartfelt gratitude. She understood that the time spent in this house had been her final period of dependence. Don't come back. With Jessica's final words at her back, Emily walked out into the snowy night. The cold outside cut to the bone. The December night in Michigan had dropped below freezing. Emily held her son to her chest and headed for a nearby park. Under the streetlights, snow danced quietly. The park bench was covered with snow. Emily wiped the bench with the blanket she had and sat down. In his mother's warmth, Noah had finally stopped crying. I'm sorry, Noah. Mommy is pathetic, making you go through such hardship. Emily looked at her son's small face and shed tears. I'll work hard. I'll surely give you a happy life. Grandfather is watching over us too, and we're not alone. The snow continued falling, but a quiet flame burned in Emily's heart. She didn't yet know that this night of family rejection would become the turning point of her life. For the few hours until dawn, Emily spent time on the park bench holding her son. The cold was harsh, but her heart was strangely calm. She could no longer rely on her family. From now on, she would have to live by the strength of herself and her son alone. When the morning light began to shine, Emily stood up. A new day was about to begin. And her new life was also about to begin at this moment. Let's go, Noah. Let's go find our real home. In his mother's arms, Noah slept peacefully. The small town of Hudson Valley in upstate New York is known for artists living quietly. The house where Emily lived with Noah wasn't large, but it was a warm and beautiful home. Flowers she had planted bloomed in the garden, and natural light poured in through the large windows. 3 years had passed since that snowy night. Emily's life had changed as if she were a different person. The first few months were certainly harsh. She stayed at a shelter for women and children, worked cleaning jobs during the day, and continued painting at night. The turning point came when a small portrait she displayed at a local cafe caught the eye of an art lover who happened to pass by. Who painted this picture? It's truly wonderful. That woman, Sarah Davis, ran a small gallery locally. She recognized Emily's talent and gave her the opportunity to hold her first solo exhibition. The exhibition was a great success, and Emily's portraits became well known locally. Now Emily was known as portrait artist E. Hartwell. She specialized in portraits of local families and children, and her warm painting style was loved by many people. Her monthly income was stable, and she could raise Noah in a good environment. Noah, now 3.5, had grown into a bright and healthy boy. He attended a nearby preschool and had many friends. For Emily, her son's smile was the greatest treasure. This Sunday morning also began peacefully as usual. Emily was eating breakfast with Noah while contemplating ideas for a new painting. Mommy, are we going to the park today? Yes. The weather's nice, so shall we take art supplies and go sketching? Noah clapped his hands happily. He loved watching his mother paint, and sometimes he would draw alongside her with small crayons. Around 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Emily wasn't expecting any visitors. It was unusual to have guests on a Sunday morning. She checked the intercom monitor. What appeared on the screen were two familiar women. However, their appearance was vastly different from her memories of 3 years ago. Margaret and Jessica were prostrating themselves in front of the entrance. Emily's heart pounded violently. Their clothing was clearly more modest than before, and Margaret especially looked aged. Jessica too had lost her former glamour. "Mommy, did someone come?" Noah asked innocently. Emily took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "There's a little business. Noah, could you play in your room?" After sending her son upstairs, Emily looked at the monitor again. The two were still there, and Margaret was holding some documents with trembling hands. Emily quietly took out her cell phone without opening the door. Then she called 911. "Yes, police? There are suspicious people in front of my house. The address is..." 10 minutes after the call, a patrol car arrived. She could see through the monitor as the officer questioned the two women. Margaret desperately explained something, shouting, "She's my daughter. My daughter." The officer pressed the intercom. "Excuse me. These two women claim to be your relatives. Could you speak with them?" After a long silence, Emily answered. "I understand. But at the entrance, please." She put on a coat and opened the door. The appearance of her mother and sister, whom she was seeing for the first time in 3 years, was vastly different from what she remembered. Margaret's hair had turned completely white, and deep wrinkles were etched in her face. Jessica too had lost her former beauty and wore an exhausted expression. "Emily." Margaret's voice trembled. She bowed her head to her daughter while being mindful of the officer's presence. "We need to talk. Please." Emily crossed her arms and answered while maintaining distance. "What is your business?" "This, please look at this." Margaret held out documents with trembling hands. They were important-looking documents in a law firm's envelope. Emily took the papers and checked their contents. They were grandfather William's will and a final notice from a trust bank. The will contained surprising contents. Her grandfather had possessed considerable assets while alive. Real estate, art collection, and cash totaling approximately $5 million in value. However, the inheritance conditions were complex. There was a clause stating Emily inherits all property when she becomes independent as a painter and holds a solo exhibition. Furthermore, it also stated, if family members obstruct her artistic activities, inheritance rights automatically transfer to her child after a 3-year grace period. And the notice from the trust bank stated that Emily's solo exhibition success had been confirmed, and the inheritance rights transferring to Noah had been finalized. "You knew about this will, didn't you?" Emily's voice was quiet, but deep anger dwelled within it. Margaret answered while shedding tears. "We knew. But we thought you would give up. You thought if you kicked me out, I would give up the inheritance." Jessica also spoke while crying. "I'm sorry, sister. We were wrong. It's too late now." Emily continued reading the documents. If inheritance rights transferred to Noah, the guardian's consent would be necessary. In other words, it was up to Emily's judgment. "So what do you want?" Margaret desperately bowed her head. "Please. Forgive us. Let us start over as a family." "Family?" Emily laughed quietly. "That snowy night, you called Noah and me a trash. You said grandfather's death was my fault too. Is that what family does?" The two were speechless. The officer was also beginning to understand this family's complex circumstances. "Miss, what would you like to do?" the officer asked. Emily stared at her mother and sister for a long time. "I would like these two to leave the premises. Please don't approach us in the future. Emily, please." Margaret shouted desperately, but Emily didn't look back. "Officer, thank you for your trouble. Please tell these people not to contact us in the future." The officer showed understanding and escorted the two women to the car. After the patrol car left, Emily stood alone at the entrance. In her hands was her grandfather's will. Looking at the document filled with his love and expectations, Emily smiled quietly. "Grandfather, thank you. Your belief saved me." From inside the house, Noah's bright voice could be heard. "Mommy, is it over? Let's go to the park." Emily carefully put away the documents and headed toward her son. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Emily read through her grandfather's will in detail. The explanatory documents from the trust bank officer showed that Grandfather William's deep love and foresight were embedded throughout. The will contained detailed clauses that Emily hadn't known about. During his lifetime, her grandfather had been deeply concerned that his daughter Margaret didn't understand art. And he feared more than anything that his granddaughter Emily's talent would be crushed by the family. When Emily is recognized as a true painter, she will be worthy of inheriting everything from me. However, if family members obstruct her dreams and she becomes discouraged, that sin is heavy. I give a 3-year grace period. If during that time the family realizes their mistakes and supports Emily, that would be good. However, if they abandon her, the inheritance goes to her child. At the end of her grandfather's letter, it stated, "To my most beloved granddaughter. I'm watching from heaven as you become independent as a painter and hold a solo exhibition. Even when betrayed by family, you didn't give up. That strength is the soul of a true artist. Now is your time. Live proudly." Emily shed tears while savoring her gratitude to her grandfather. The following week, formal procedures were conducted at the trust bank. Emily made an important decision about the inheritance. She decided to accept only her grandfather's small studio and mementos, using the majority of the remaining assets to establish the William Hartwell Arts Support Foundation. "Grandfather taught me never to give up on my dreams. That's the greatest inheritance. I already have something more precious than money." The foundation was established to support young artists facing financial difficulties. Emily didn't want others to experience the hardships she had gone through. Meanwhile, the aftermath for Margaret and Jessica was harsh. Not only were their expectations for the inheritance dashed, but they could no longer maintain their previous lifestyle. Margaret had to sell her house in the upscale neighborhood and move to a small apartment. Jessica also ended up working as a part-time employee at the department store while living a modest life. However, this trial brought important realizations to both of them. Only after losing material wealth did they begin to understand what was truly important. Margaret especially deeply reflected on how cruel she had been to her daughter Emily. "I was a failure as a mother. I crushed Emily's talent and put my grandson in danger. I did something irreversible." Jessica also regretted that her jealousy toward her sister and vanity had destroyed family bonds. 6 months later, a letter arrived for Emily. The sender was Margaret. "To my beloved Emily. I know I don't have the right to apologize to you. But there's something I must tell you. I'm watching from afar as you become a fine painter and raised Noah into a wonderful child. I made mistakes as a mother and as a human being. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you and Noah to be happy, that's my only wish now." After reading the letter, Emily quietly put it away in a drawer. She had no intention of forgiving, but she also didn't intend to harbor hatred. When spring arrived, Emily held her second solo exhibition. Many people visited the venue and praised her works. Among them was a curator from the local museum. "Ms. Hartwell, we would like to display your works in our permanent exhibition." Emily's dreams were steadily becoming reality. On the final day of the exhibition, Noah visited the venue. Looking up at his mother's paintings, he said innocently, "Mommy's paintings are so beautiful. I want to become good at drawing too." Emily picked up her son and smiled gently. "Noah, you can do whatever you like. Mommy will always support your dreams." As the sunset streamed into the venue, mother and son spent quiet time surrounded by paintings. Family isn't just about blood relations. The bonds of hearts that believe in and support each other are the true proof of family. Emily and Noah, and the soul of grandfather William in heaven, were eternally connected. The story of a new family, woven together by love and art, would continue from now on.